by scratching the surface, you get a terrible shock. It's such a, well, it's a heinous crime. People are so shocked by what...
7 minutes ago, a sealed folder carried through a private palace corridor shattered the fragile calm surrounding the royal family. Inside were handwritten instructions, restricted schedules, and a calculated plan bearing Queen Camilla's private annotations. The target was unmistakable. Princess Catherine. What appeared to be routine household paperwork exposed something far darker, a secret campaign designed to weaken Catherine's position before she could become the monarchy's most powerful woman. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Prince William closed the door, placed his phone face down, and stared at the confidential folder just delivered. A royal briefing, the private meeting where royals receive updates, should have protected Catherine's position. Instead, the papers showed that Camilla had instructed staff to restrict her access, remove her from engagements, and question her readiness for greater responsibility. He read the first page twice. Beside Catherine's name sat the phrases, limited visibility, and controlled access. Cold words that turned months of confusion into betrayal. Catherine entered expecting an ordinary update, but William silently turned the folder toward her. She read the altered schedules and private assessments, then lowered herself into a chair. Why, she asked, would someone inside the family try to weaken her? The future queen had accepted pressure as part of royal life, but this attack had come from behind doors where trust was supposed to matter most. William traced the documents to a discrepancy found by one palace aide, who compared Catherine's approved calendar with a version distributed through the Queen's office. An engagement is an official appearance performed on behalf of the Crown, so removing her from several meant reducing her public role and national connection. The folder exposed a coordinated operation involving invitations, press briefings, ceremonial positioning, and judgments about her influence. Then one handwritten note changed everything. Catherine's popularity, it declared, had to be contained before transition planning begins. Transition planning meant the private preparation for William's future reign, making the instruction an attack on both her present duties and her eventual place beside him. Her shock hardened into quiet hurt as she realized the exclusions of recent months had never been accidents. William numbered the pages and stopped. One sheet was missing. Someone had removed the most dangerous instruction, or the name of another participant. He told Catherine that no aide would enter until they understood exactly what had been done to her. But before William could confront the woman behind the plan, he first had to understand why Catherine's rise had become so threatening to Camilla, and how deeply personal their struggle had already become. Behind the titles, ceremonies, and carefully controlled smiles stood two women carrying entirely different relationships with the crown. Catherine represented continuity, public affection, and a future many already embraced. Camilla carried decades of scrutiny, survival, and a position she had fought to secure. Their conflict was not simply about schedules or status. It was about legacy, and the terrifying possibility that history might remember one woman while quietly pushing the other aside. Catherine stood beside the window, holding the altered engagement schedule, then circled 3 canceled appearances with a pen. Each event would have placed her beside William during moments of national importance, and each removal had quietly reduced her visibility. As the future queen, the woman expected one day to stand beside the reigning monarch. Her influence had grown through discipline, family stability, public trust, and years of steady service. She had never demanded attention, yet attention had followed her, and that made the campaign against her even more painful. William watched her face change, and felt anger mixed with guilt. He had reassured her more than once that the missing invitations were probably administrative mistakes. Now the folder proved otherwise. Camilla had been tracking Catherine's charitable announcements, private meetings, and official invitations for months, measuring where her influence was expanding. A royal household is the team of advisors and staff supporting a senior member of the family, and these records showed that the Queen's office had treated the Wales household like a rival. operation rather than part of the same monarchy. Camilla sat alone in her private drawing room, with a newspaper spread across the table. Catherine and William dominated the front page, while her own appearance was reduced to a smaller image beneath them. She had endured years of hostility before reaching the throne, and that long struggle had made her fiercely protective of every sign of authority. Public smiles had hidden that fear. Catherine remembered several recent occasions when the monarch greeted her warmly before cameras, then avoided conversation once the courtiers moved away. What had seemed awkward now felt calculated. The folder carried an even darker clue. A coded reference to the succession household appeared beside Catherine's engagements. Succession meant the order in which the crown passes from one monarch to the next, making the phrase a direct reference to William's future reign and the influence his wife would hold within it. Camilla was not merely defending her present role. She appeared to be protecting herself from a future she feared would leave her forgotten. William turned another page and found the date of one royal ceremony marked repeatedly in the margins. Catherine saw his expression harden as he realized this had not begun gradually. One moment had changed everything. One remark, spoken after the applause had faded, had transformed insecurity into a plan. The rivalry had existed beneath the surface for months, but it took one unforgettable ceremony and one private remark overheard afterward to turn tension into a calculated act of betrayal. Every palace rupture has a moment that appears harmless until history looks back and recognizes the warning. For Camilla, that moment came during the Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey, when the crowd's reaction shifted the emotional balance inside the royal family. Catherine stepped forward beside William, and cheers rolled across the entrance. Camilla remained composed, but one quiet exchange behind closed doors transformed public applause into private resentment and set the secret plan in motion. Camilla removed her gloves slowly after the ceremony and placed the printed program on a table. The Commonwealth Service is an annual gathering celebrating the nations connected through the Commonwealth, making it one of the monarchy's most visible displays of unity. Yet the Queen had heard something beneath the applause that no formal ceremony could hide. The public response to William and Catherine had been warmer, louder, and impossible to dismiss. When a senior communications advisor entered, she asked him to repeat the phrase he had used moments earlier: future public strategy. The advisor chose his words carefully. Audience reaction, international coverage, and preparations for a gradual transfer of visible duties all pointed in the same direction. William and Catherine would increasingly stand at the center of major national events. Camilla listened without interrupting, but her hand tightened around the program when he described Catherine as the monarchy, strongest bridge to the next generation. A transfer of visible duties meant shifting more public responsibilities toward the future king and his wife, allowing the nation to become familiar with the couple expected to lead next. Catherine knew nothing of the wound opening behind that closed door. Later, she warmly thanked Camilla for guiding her through a procedural detail during the service. The princess believed the exchange showed respect and unity. The monarch heard something else. To her, the gratitude sounded like recognition that she now belonged to an older chapter, while Catherine represented everything still to come. That misunderstanding turned courtesy into humiliation, and humiliation into resentment. Camilla summoned her senior secretary that same evening and ordered a private review of every engagement that could expand Catherine's independent profile. A senior secretary is the trusted official who manages sensitive decisions, correspondence, and access around a royal household. During their documented conversation, the Queen stated that the princess must not be allowed to build a court within the court. The phrase was later copied into the exposed folder, linking the ceremony directly to the secret campaign. William studied the missing page once it was recovered and found the date of that meeting, written across the top. The evidence now led straight to Camilla's private office. Catherine remembered smiling at her that day and felt devastated that a moment she had treasured as family unity became the spark for betrayal. With the origin of the plot finally exposed, William no longer saw a misunderstanding that could be managed quietly. He saw a deliberate attack that demanded a face-to-face reckoning. The confrontation began without cameras, advisors, or ceremonial protection. William entered Camilla's private sitting room, carrying the folder beneath his arm, while Catherine followed several steps behind him. Charles was already waiting, uncertain why the meeting had been demanded so urgently. Then William placed the documents on the table and asked one devastating question. Why had the Queen used palace authority to sabotage the future Queen? In that instant, every polite illusion collapsed. William had insisted that only the four of them attend. He refused to let officials soften the evidence, reinterpret the language, or turn betrayal into an administrative misunderstanding. A private sitting room is an informal royal space used for personal meetings away from official ceremony, but nothing about this gathering felt private or safe. Charles first assumed the dispute involved scheduling. Then his son identified the direct instructions issued through Camilla's household, and the king's posture changed. Catherine spoke before anger could take control. She asked Camilla whether she had personally approved the removal of her name from 2 national engagements. The princess kept her voice calm, yet the Queen avoided the question and accused William of turning ordinary administrative choices into a family attack. He slid the folder across the table. It stopped directly before her. She glanced at the handwriting, pushed back her chair, and remained silent for several long seconds. Camilla finally described Catherine's growing influence as premature. That single word broke William's restraint. He told her that protecting one position by humiliating another was not service to the crown. The crown meant both the monarch and the authority of the monarchy itself, making her actions more serious than a private disagreement. They had used royal power to weaken the woman expected to help carry that institution into its next reign. Catherine reached into the folder and produced the handwritten note. Its script matched Camilla's known correspondence, destroying the claim that junior staff had acted alone. Her voice trembled only once. She asked whether the monarch had ever considered what this campaign could do to George, Charlotte, and Louis, if their mother were publicly portrayed as unstable or unprepared. The Queen looked away, but Catherine did not. Her children had turned the betrayal from political cruelty into something deeply personal. Charles lifted the note and read the instruction about containing Catherine before transition planning began. His expression hardened when he saw his authority had been invoked without his knowledge. The king now understood that Camilla had not simply targeted the princess. She had used his position as cover. Charles closed the folder and asked William and Catherine to leave. Then he turned toward his wife and told her to remain seated. The confrontation exposed the betrayal, but the next decision belonged to Charles, and his response would reveal whether marriage, monarchy, or the future of his son carried the greatest weight. When the others left, Charles remained seated across from Camilla in a silence more painful than anger. Before him lay proof that his wife had manipulated palace machinery, used his position without permission, and targeted the woman destined to stand beside the next king. Camilla had once been the person he defended against the world. Now he had to decide whether defending her again would endanger the monarchy he had waited a lifetime to lead. Charles did not raise his voice. He asked why she had done it, and the Queen finally answered through a private recorded account, requested for the palace review. She said she feared being erased. Catherine's household was growing stronger. William's authority was expanding, and every public success of the younger couple seemed to push her closer to the edge. A royal household is the team of advisors and officials serving a senior family member, and controlling that structure meant controlling schedules, information, and access. Camilla believed the balance was changing faster than anyone had agreed. The king listened with his hands folded over the folder. He remembered promising that she would never again face isolation while he still had the power to protect her. Yet he was no longer only a husband. As sovereign, the person who carries the crown's highest duty, he possessed the formal authority to reorganize households, restrict access to sensitive planning, and remove anyone from decision-making structures. Love had once demanded that he stand beside Camilla. Duty now demanded that he judge her. Charles turned another page and found the most damaging instruction. Staff had been told to invoke his name when challenging Catherine's engagements, giving the impression that the king himself wanted her influence reduced. The plot was no longer a private act of jealousy. It was an abuse of royal authority. William's growing constitutional importance, the practical weight he carries as the next heir expected to become monarch, made that abuse even more dangerous because the campaign struck directly at the future reign. A palace secretary entered only after being summoned and delivered a documented statement from 2 aides. Both had objected to the instructions and secretly preserved copies because they feared the Bothwell operation could trigger a constitutional family crisis. Camilla looked toward Charles, but he avoided her eyes. The evidence had closed every escape. The monarch pulled a blank order toward him and began writing. It would remove the Queen's office from Catherine's schedule, private briefings, and succession planning with immediate effect. Camilla reached across the desk and placed her hand over the unsigned page. He slowly removed it. Charles signed, set the pen between them, and said love could not excuse conduct that damaged the crown. The king's signature ended Camilla's control in a matter of seconds, but beyond that closed room, the consequences were already moving through the palace faster than anyone could contain them. By the following morning, the palace had changed around Camilla without making a single public announcement. Briefing folders no longer arrived at her desk. Meetings disappeared from her calendar. Staff who once waited for her approval were instructed to report elsewhere. The punishment was silent, precise, and impossible to misunderstand. For the first time since becoming queen, Camilla felt authority withdrawing from the room before she had even entered it. Camilla arrived for the morning briefing, carrying papers she had prepared the night before. She stopped when she saw the empty space where her usual chair had stood. A palace briefing is a private meeting where senior royals and trusted officials review duties, security, and major decisions, and exclusion from it meant she no longer had influence over the matters being discussed. The Queen folded the papers quietly. No one asked for them. No one invited her to remain. Charles's signed order had taken effect immediately. Her office had lost all authority over Catherine's engagements, communication strategy, medical confidentiality, and future succession planning. Medical confidentiality meant the strict protection of private health information, making restriction especially severe after the hidden campaign had crossed into deeply personal territory. William and Catherine now held direct control over their household calendar, while an independent review began examining every change made during the previous 6 months. Catherine received apologies from 2 senior aides in a documented palace meeting. Both admitted they had noticed irregular instructions, but had feared challenging the Queen's office. The princess felt no triumph as they spoke. Their regret only confirmed how powerful the pressure had become, and how alone she had been, while believing the exclusions were simple mistakes. William stood beside her, listening with growing anger, as each apology exposed another moment when silence had protected the wrong person. Then the review uncovered something darker. A draft press note had been prepared for release if Catherine resisted the restrictions. It questioned whether she could maintain a full royal workload and suggested her responsibilities might need to be reduced. A press note is a prepared statement given to journalists to shape public coverage, and this one had been designed to turn private resistance into public doubt. William read further and found references to Catherine's health. The statement had never been released, but the violation was already complete. Camilla's office had been willing to use private information to weaken the future queen before the nation. Catherine felt anger surge through her, then closed the document and said she would not allow someone else's fear to decide who she became. Catherine turned to William and asked for one private meeting with Camilla. No Charles, no secretaries, no palace protection between them. The machinery of power had delivered its punishment, but Catherine understood that the real turning point could only happen when 2 wounded women finally faced each other without titles standing between them. Their second meeting was nothing like the first. There were no folders, no accusing witnesses, and no king waiting to deliver judgment. Catherine entered a small private room where Camilla sat alone beside an untouched cup of tea. For several moments, Neither woman spoke. Then Catherine asked the question beneath every document and every act of sabotage. Was Camilla truly afraid of losing power? Or was she afraid that Catherine would receive the acceptance she had never been given? Catherine had requested this meeting because punishment could explain what Camilla had done, but it could not explain why. She wanted the motive beneath the altered schedules, the private notes, and the draft statement. The Wales household, the advisors and staff serving William, his wife, and their children, had already been placed beyond the Queen's control. Yet Catherine knew that rules alone could not repair what fear had destroyed. Camilla tried to explain herself through rank, duty, and the pressure of protecting her position. Catherine gently raised one hand. She said she would listen only if the Queen spoke as a woman, rather than from behind her title. The monarch fell silent, stripped of practical influence, and surrounded by no officials who could defend her. She understood that excuses would not restore what she had lost. Catherine told her that exclusion had hurt, but the deeper betrayal came when another woman used her health and family responsibilities as weapons. She had spent years carrying public expectations while protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis from the harshest pressures of royal life. To discover that those private struggles had been turned into a strategy made the wound impossible to dismiss as politics. Camilla finally admitted the truth in a recorded account prepared for the palace review. Catherine's effortless public affection had awakened years of resentment. The Queen feared that when William became king, her own place would vanish, and history would remember only the woman who followed her. Her composure broke as she confessed that she had become so determined not to be erased that she nearly repeated the same cruelty she had condemned for years. Then came the admission Catherine had been waiting for. Camilla confirmed that she personally approved the draft press note questioning the princess's workload. She stopped it only after realizing its release would also wound William and the children. That hesitation had prevented public damage, but it did not erase the intent. Catherine answered with quiet finality. She would not demand Camilla's public removal, but the monarch would never again hold influence over the Wales household. The boundary was permanent. The Queen accepted it and agreed to send a written admission to Charles and William, creating the foundation for a final palace settlement. That private admission changed the struggle from a hidden war into a reckoning, and once the palace prepared its official response, the world outside the gates began demanding its own verdict. By midday, the secret had escaped the palace. One newspaper appeared beneath a stark front page, showing Catherine entering a royal engagement alone beneath the words, "The Queen's Hidden Campaign." Broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, holding phones above their heads as every new detail spread. What began as a private struggle between two women had become a public test of character, legitimacy, and the monarchy's ability to police itself. Charles authorized a carefully worded palace statement confirming an internal review, changes to household responsibilities, and his full confidence in William and Catherine. An internal review is a formal examination of decisions, records, and conduct within the royal household, and its public confirmation told the nation that the crisis was too serious to dismiss as family tension. The king revealed no private documents, but the language carried a clear warning. Authority had been misused, and consequences had already begun. A live presenter paused as the statement reached the studio. After reading it twice, she looked directly into the camera and said the monarchy had effectively acknowledged that Catherine was targeted from within. A respected royal commentator then quoted its most severe line: "Private health information must never be used for strategic advantage." The words confirmed the nature of the offense without exposing every painful detail, and media coverage quickly framed the dispute as a generational battle between the established household and the future monarchy, represented by William and his wife. Catherine watched the broadcast in silence. Hearing herself described as the victim of a calculated campaign brought no comfort. The princess felt transformed into a national symbol when she was still a wife and mother, trying to understand why someone close to the family had chosen to wound her. William remained beside her, guarded and tense. Public support mattered, because it protected her reputation, but he knew applause could not repair the trust broken behind palace doors. Camilla saw the same front page outside a London kiosk and lowered her eyes. She had spent years rebuilding public acceptance after decades of judgment, yet one hidden campaign had placed that hard-won rehabilitation in danger. The Queen understood that the story was no longer controlled by private meetings or careful wording. The country had seen fear turn into abuse of power. Then Catherine's car passed Buckingham Palace. The waiting crowd recognized her and began applauding, a sudden wave of support that captured the public mood more clearly than any poll or headline. She acknowledged them quietly while William watched, knowing the nation had chosen where its sympathy belonged. Charles received word of the reaction and began preparing one final family declaration. It would protect Catherine's authority, define Camilla's reduced role, and settle the crisis permanently. The nation had chosen where its sympathy belonged, but only the king's final settlement could determine what the betrayal would mean inside the monarchy, and whether trust could survive after power had been abused. The final settlement did not arrive with a dramatic dismissal or a public spectacle. It came through a signed declaration, read privately, to the senior royal family. Catherine's household would remain fully independent, her personal information would receive permanent protection, and no office outside the king's or William's could interfere with her duties. Camilla would retain her title, but the influence she had used against the future queen was removed for good. Charles read every line aloud, while William sat beside Catherine, and Camilla listened without interruption. The declaration was a formal written order defining how royal authority would operate after the crisis, and its terms left no room for private reinterpretation. The prince and his wife would control their engagements, advisors, communications, and succession preparations without oversight from the Queen's household. Succession preparations meant the private planning for William's eventual reign, making this protection essential to the monarchy's future stability. Camilla would remain queen, but she would withdraw permanently from strategic meetings concerning the next reign. Charles told her the decision was not designed to humiliate her. It was permanent because the monarchy could not survive if personal insecurity controlled institutional power. The king had defended his wife for years, but he now understood that protecting her from consequences would only deepen the damage she had caused. Catherine turned quietly toward William and admitted that she did not feel victorious. She felt relieved. Their children would not grow up watching their mother slowly diminished inside her own family, and they would not inherit a royal household shaped by fear and hidden rivalry. The future king reached for her hand, knowing that her restraint had protected more than her reputation. It had protected the emotional foundation of their family. Camilla's written admission confirmed that she alone had authorized the restrictions and approved the draft press note. The documented statement cleared Charles, William, Catherine, and the wider household of responsibility. The missing page was also recovered and placed inside the official review archive, the secure record preserving evidence and decisions from the investigation. No future denial could erase what had happened. No rewritten story could shift the blame elsewhere. Charles finished reading and placed the settlement before Camilla. She removed her glasses, signed the acknowledgement, and slid it toward Catherine. The princess accepted the page without celebration. She nodded, closed the folder, and reached again for William's hand. Camilla left, knowing that her fear of being erased had caused the very loss of influence she tried to prevent. Catherine walked away wounded but unbroken. Her strength had not come from destroying the queen. It came from refusing to answer betrayal with cruelty, choosing firm boundaries, stability, and dignity over revenge. And as the signed folder was finally locked away, the palace was left with one undeniable truth. Camilla had fought to preserve her place, but Catherine's refusal to be broken had secured the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.